Hi, my name is Dave. I'm your host. You're listening to The Last Podcast, where the first shall be last and the last shall be first. If this is your first time listening, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. I really appreciate you listening, and I hope you continue to find tips, ideas, and value from listening to this podcast. Today, I want to talk about how to break bad habits. Do you have a bad habit that you want to get rid of? Then this episode is for you. Bad habits, whether they involve unhealthy eating, procrastination, smoking, or negative self-talk, can be difficult to break. And I'm quite sure if you ever had to break a habit, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because the process of changing habits is deeply rooted into neuroscience and psychology. Understanding our habits and how they form and why they persist, and the scientific methods to replace them with positive behaviors can significantly increase the chances of success. I'm going to tell you about a guy. His name is James, right? And he had a struggle most of his life, his adult life, I would say. But his bad habit was procrastination. How many of you have ever dealt with procrastination? That was his bad habit. You see, James was a talented graphic designer with big dreams of starting his own freelance business. However, he had one major roadblock. That was procrastination. Every time he sat down to work on a project, he found himself scrolling through social media, watching YouTube videos, or even playing video games. He would tell himself, I'll start in about 10 minutes. But those 10 minutes, they stretched into hours. His habit delayed tasks became so severe that he missed deadlines, disappointed clients, and eventually lost his contracts. He felt like a failure, stuck in a cycle of guilt and avoidance. Does this sound familiar to you? Because James' bad habit of procrastination didn't just affect his work, it seeped into other areas of his life. Financial struggle, losing clients meant losing income, his savings dwindled, and he struggled to pay his bills. Mental health declined as well. Now, the constant stretch of unfinished work led to anxiety, self-doubt. He often felt like he wasn't good enough. And friends and family started to notice his frustration, withdrawing from social activities. Now, his procrastination even went so far as he started missing opportunities. While his peers advanced into their own careers, James felt stuck, watching others succeed while he remained stagnant. Now, James did come to a turning point. One night, James came across a TED Talk. The TED Talk was on the science of procrastination. The speaker explained how procrastination isn't just laziness. It's a battle between instant gratification monkey and the rational decision maker. But a concept from Tim Urban's famous blog, Wait But Why. This struck a chord with James. And you can't help but understand why he wanted to know a whole lot more, because he was experiencing this. He realized that his habit was rooted in avoiding discomfort and seeking immediate pleasure. That was his thing. He was always seeking immediate pleasure. Whenever he had a task, James, he would back away and said, I'll get to it later. If it wasn't fun, if it wasn't exciting, if it wasn't something that was pleasurable to him, he would procrastinate. He would put it off. But he realized he couldn't keep living his life like this. The steps James took to overcome procrastination. He first had to identify his triggers. So he started tracking his procrastination patterns. He noticed that he was most prone to distractions when he had a vague task without clear deadlines. He felt overwhelmed by big projects, or when he worked in an environment full of distractions. So the first thing he had to do was identify those triggers. And all those triggers, he had to say to himself, okay, how could I attack these triggers? What could I do now that I know these are my triggers? So he had to do something different. He had to change up what he was doing, implementing a 2-minute rule. James adopted a 2-minute rule from James Clear's Atomic Habits. If you haven't read that book by any chance, it's an awesome book. If a task takes longer than 2 minutes, do it immediately. For bigger tasks, he broke down into smaller, manageable steps. Instead of saying, I need to design a whole website, he told himself, I'll sketch a rough draft for 10 minutes. Now, using the Pomodoro technique, he set a timer for 25 minutes to focus on work, and then followed by a 5-minute break. This kept him engaged without feeling overwhelmed. Now, that technique, was developed by a guy in 1980. His name is Francesco, and I know that I might get this wrong on his last name because it's Italian. Cirillo. That's how I'm pronouncing it, but it's probably incorrect, but you can look it up online. Who used a tomato-shaped kitchen timer to organize his study schedule. Now, James' fourth thing that he had to do was remove the social media apps off his phone. Oh, did I just strike a chord with so many of you? I know. Removing the apps off the phone is huge, right? But he had to take drastic steps because he started losing money, he started losing friends, and he started losing opportunities. So definitely he had to take drastic steps. So James removed the social media apps from his phone. He used website blockers and worked in a quiet space where he didn't have too many distractions. He even set his phone to do not disturb while working. And his fifth item was finding accountability partners. If that's you, if you don't have anybody who's saying, yo, did you get this done yet? Hey, did you finish this? Where you at in this project? He had people to help him move along. He teamed up with fellow designers who also struggled with procrastination, and together they worked together to help themselves and keep themselves motivated. Now, with bad habits, whether it's smoking, whether it's overeating, you have to remember why you do these things, right? So you're getting some type of pleasure from it. So he had to set up a reward system. Instead of waiting until the project was completed to feel accomplished, James started celebrating small wins. Completing the draft meant a coffee break, and finishing a project earned him a guilt-free movie night. Awesome. Hey, listen, the transformation that James made, he noticed a massive shift. His productivity increased, clients started returning, and his income stabilized. More importantly, he regained his confidence in himself. Procrastination didn't disappear overnight. It took some work and it took effort, but he now has strategies to fight it. 1 year later, James successfully launched his freelance business. He even started mentoring others struggling with procrastination, providing transformation is possible when we take intentional steps. So what's the true science behind our habits? So habits are automatically behaviors triggered by specific cues, aren't they? Well, according to research, habits form through a process called habit loops, which consist of 3 main components. And I mentioned them earlier. It's the trigger, it's the cue, a stimulus that initiates the behavior, right? And I would say the second part would probably be the routine, whatever it is, our behavior, the habitual action itself. And then the third thing is, I mentioned a few minutes ago, which is the reward. The benefit gained from the habit reinforces its repetition. Neuroscientists have found that habits are encoded in the basal ganglia, a part of the brain that's responsible for the automatic behaviors and decision making. This explains why habits can persist even when we consciously want to change them. Why are bad habits so hard to break? Have you ever tried to break a bad habit? I mean, I know I've broken many in my lifetime, and I'm still breaking bad habits. But do you have a bad habit that you've tried to break and just found like, wow, I don't know, you're doing so good for like a month, 2 months, and all of a sudden, before you even know it, you're back doing the same thing. Sometimes without you even knowing that you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then months down the road, you realize you're in the same boat. Yep, that is a bad habit, and they are hard to break. Neurological pathways. Repeated behaviors create a strong neural pathway, making them automatic. So when those habits that we have are deep rooted and they are habit forming, and they form the habit over a course of, let's say, 5 to 10, maybe even 20 years, oh, you got some work to do. And then the dopamine and pleasure magnitude of your habits. Many bad habits like smoking or binge eating provide an immediate dopamine rush and reinforcing their repetition. And what about environmental cues, situations, places, or even emotional states triggered habitual behaviors? Have you ever been listening to a song and all of a sudden it took you back like years in the past? This is what they're talking about. Environmental cues or musical cues or anything of that nature. Understanding these mechanisms help us design strategies to override our bad habits. And right now, I'm going to give you just a couple of steps to breaking bad habits. And the first step I already talked about, identifying the triggers and replace the routine. Keep the habit journal, whatever it is, so you can write down when you're triggered, how you're triggered, the time, the place, the people, emotions, what triggered, how you felt at that time. Write it all down, because once you have the journal, once you identify and modify the routine while keeping the cue and reward constant. For an example, let's say that instead of stress eating, try deep breathing or taking a walk. And the reason why I say you want to put something in its place, because you still want to be able, that habit is going to be so deep rooted, it's not going to be like a cold turkey thing. You have to be able to work in certain steps to keep a certain pattern and change the behavior, if that makes sense for you. Number 2, use the implementation intention strategy. Instead of vague goals like I want to stop eating junk food, use specific plans. When I feel stress at work, I'm going to drink a glass of water instead of eating snacks. Something like that. Water is always healthy. And believe me, I have a bad habit right now. And I'm going to tell you something. My habit has been around for the past 20 years. And I've stopped it. And then it started back up. I've had smoke. I used to smoke. I no longer smoke. I've been smoke free for around 25 years. I used to have other habits, bad habits, and I've been free of those habits. But one habit has stuck around and it stayed with me. You're gonna laugh. And anybody who knows me know this, they're probably laughing, and if they're listening to this right now, they're really laughing because they already know the answer. Every evening, without fail, I'll have like 4 cookies. Yep, I can't help it. I crave cookies every night. And there are times when I don't eat cookies and I put something in its place, like something like nuts or peanut butter on graham crackers, or peanut butter with orange marmalade. I might put that in its place too. But believe it or not, for the past 4 months, it's been cookies practically every night. Yep, gotta have them. It just soothes my whole night. And yep, you got it. I got a bad habit. So I'm quite sure you listening, you got some kind of bad habit too. So don't just knock me. Don't shame me. All right. And I think bad habits are difficult to get rid of, but there is workable ways. You can increase your effort needing to engage in a habit. For example, if you want to reduce social media usage, log out after every session to move the app to a hidden folder. And I know that's a little bit extreme, but you could do that, or you could make it very difficult for yourself by removing it altogether off your phone, off your tablet. So if, let's just say, if you have it on your phone, or if you have a phone and a tablet and a laptop, make sure it's only on, take it off your phone and put it on your laptop. Because some people hate getting on their laptop. Some people hate starting it up and doing it. Whatever it is, you have to make going to the social media a task that you don't like to do. And that'll help you alleviate that going to that part of social media where you always have easy access, make it a whole lot harder. So that's something you can do. When I used to smoke cigarettes, I'm an asthmatic, and to myself, I didn't even realize I was doing all of this back then. I said, I'm just going to associate pain with smoking. So every time at the end of that journey of me smoking, I would cough my brains out, and it would hurt so bad that, you know what, I don't want another cigarette, because I started those neural pathways, and my brain started associating smoking with pain. And we all hate pain. None of us really like pain. So we're either moving away from pain or we're moving to pleasure, right? So make your habits, your bad habits, difficult to get to. This is how I stopped smoking. I would delay my gratification. I would say, instead of getting up, I always had to have a cigarette. When I get up after I brush my teeth, I got to have a cigarette. After I eat, I got to have a cigarette. I get in the car, I got to have a cigarette. So what you want to do is delay your gratification. So instead of when I get up in the morning, I'm going to wait an hour, I'm going to wait 2 hours, and I'm going to wait 3 hours, and I'm going to wait 4 hours. Eventually, I got to the point where it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon before I even had my first cigarette. And eventually I realized I didn't even need a cigarette anymore. And some people need a cigarette when they are stressed out. So I'm talking about cigarettes because I know there are a million bad habits out there, but I'm relating this to my own experience. And that's why I'm bringing up cigarettes. And the last one I would say is apply the 21-90 rule. Researchers suggest that forming a habit takes 21 days, right? But solidifying it into a lifestyle takes 90 days. Commit to a structured time frame. So you want to have a good habit, make sure, don't worry about the 21 days, commit to 90, all right? Reward yourself with small wins. Celebrating your small successes builds motivation and confidence instead of focusing on perfection or track and acknowledge your progress. I believe that if you reward yourself, and I did a podcast on small wins, you reward yourself with small wins that helps build your confidence along the way as well. Because what happens when people have bad habits and they want to stop their bad habit and they try and they become so unsuccessful at stopping that bad habit, then they start saying, I'm not good enough. And then they start belittling themselves. I don't want you to do that. So I want you to have a balance, an equilibrium when it comes to trying to build new habits and trying to break bad habits, okay? So reward yourself with the small wins. And if you have to, if you got somebody in your corner, leverage social accountability. Tell a friend, join support groups, use habit tracking apps. External accountability increases your commitment. Remember that. All right, so that is pretty much what I got for you today. Just remember that mindfulness-based approaches is a great way for you to understand your bad habits. And like I said, write your habits down, journal them so you can track your bad habits, so you know what triggers you. If, like for me, if I'm going to go with cigarettes, I know I had to have a cigarette after I eat. I got to have a cigarette when I get in my car. Well, I had to identify when I wanted a cigarette so I can put sunflower seeds when I get in the car instead of cigarettes. So you have to sometimes put something in its place that's going to give you equal amount of pleasure. I hope I gave you a few ideas to help you tackle your own bad habits and move forward. My name is Dave. You're listening to The Last Podcast, and I do me a favor and subscribe and like this podcast. I really appreciate you listening. I wish you a fantastic day and a wonderful week.